Most people assume the biggest polluters are obvious: oil companies, coal plants, heavy industry. And while those are major contributors, they're not the whole story. Some of the dirtiest industries are hiding in plain sight. They're part of everyday life, rarely questioned, and deeply embedded in global systems. That's what makes them so impactful and so overlooked. Start with fast fashion. Clothing feels harmless. It's cheap, accessible, constantly changing. But behind that is one of the most resource-intensive industries in the world. Producing textiles requires massive amounts of water. Cotton farming alone consumes huge quantities, often in regions already facing water scarcity. Then come dyes and chemicals, many of which end up in rivers, polluting water systems. Synthetic fabrics like polyester are made from petroleum. Every time they're washed, they release microplastics into waterways, tiny particles that are nearly impossible to remove and now exist throughout the global ecosystem. And because trends change quickly, clothes are discarded faster than ever. A large portion ends up in landfills or is burned, adding to pollution. Next is cement. It's everywhere: buildings, roads, infrastructure. But cement production is responsible for a significant share of global carbon emissions. The process requires extremely high temperatures, usually generated by burning fossil fuels. It also releases carbon dioxide as part of the chemical reaction itself. Unlike some industries, this isn't easy to fix. There are alternatives being developed, but scaling them globally is a major challenge. Now consider shipping. Global trade depends on massive cargo ships transporting goods across oceans. These ships often use heavy fuel oil, one of the dirtiest types of fuel available. Shipping emissions are less visible than cars or factories, but they add up quickly, and as global trade grows, so does the impact. There's also the issue of waste dumping and accidental spills, which can damage marine ecosystems. Another overlooked industry is data. The internet feels intangible, but it relies on physical infrastructure: data centers, servers, cooling systems. These facilities consume enormous amounts of electricity. As demand for streaming, cloud storage, and AI increases, so does energy consumption. If that energy comes from fossil fuels, the environmental impact grows significantly. Even when powered by renewables, data centers still require materials, land, and water for cooling. Now look at agriculture, but not in the usual way. Industrial livestock production is one of the largest sources of methane emissions. It also contributes to deforestation, water pollution, and land degradation. What makes it hidden is that it's normalized. Meat and dairy are everyday products, so their environmental cost often goes unnoticed. Mining is another major factor. It's essential for producing metals used in everything from electronics to renewable energy systems. But mining operations can destroy landscapes, contaminate water sources, and generate toxic waste. In some cases, the environmental cost is exported. Materials are extracted in one region and consumed in another, separating the impact from the consumer. Now, here's the deeper issue. These industries aren't just dirty, they're interconnected. Fast fashion relies on global shipping. Data centers support e-commerce. Mining supplies materials for infrastructure and technology. Agriculture feeds growing populations. Trying to isolate one industry misses the bigger picture. The real problem is how these systems are designed. They prioritize efficiency, scale, and cost reduction. Environmental impact is often treated as a secondary concern or an external cost. That's why these industries continue to grow even when their impacts are known. Another reason they're overlooked is visibility. People see cars on the road, but not cargo ships in the middle of the ocean. They use apps and websites, but don't see the data centers powering them. They buy clothes, but don't see the factories or waste. Out of sight makes it easier to ignore. So, what can actually change this? First, transparency. When supply chains become more visible, it's harder to hide environmental damage. This can push companies to adopt better practices. Second, innovation. Cleaner production methods, alternative materials, and more efficient systems can reduce impact, but they need investment and time. Third, regulation. Governments can set standards, limit emissions, and create incentives for sustainable practices. Without policy pressure, change tends to be slow. Finally, demand. Consumer choices influence markets, but only to a point. Large-scale change requires shifts at the system level, not just individual behavior. In the end, the dirtiest industries aren't always the ones people talk about. They're the ones built into daily life, quietly shaping environmental impact at a global scale. Understanding that is the first step towards changing it.